Wonder Woman is the fourth film in the DC Cinematic Universe and is directed by Patty Jenkins, and it stars Gal Gadot and Chris Pine. And this movie is basically about the origins of Wonder Woman. This movie is years before the DC movies we're at now. It takes place during World War I, and this movie is basically about how Wonder Woman is part of this island where only women exist, and then Chris Pine gets there, and then she learns a little bit about the outside world. It's stuff that's explained in the movie, so I don't need to explain it too much, but she basically learns about the outside world, and she's in this little, island that is isolated from the rest of the world. She hears from Chris Pine that outside of this mystical island, there's a crazy war going on, and she wants to help stop it out of the goodness of her heart. So guys, as you know, I was excited but reserved for Wonder Woman, because like I mentioned in my 2017 preview thing, I mentioned that DC hasn't been very good ever since, Dark Knight Rises? I actually think Man of Steel is actually a good film. I think it's good, but there are a lot of problems with it. It could have been a lot better. And then Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad are two of some of the most disappointing movies that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, when I first saw those, I was so in denial with how disappointing they were. Even if you see my first Suicide Squad review or my first Batman v Superman review, I both gave those positive grades. If I were to review them now, I wouldn't give them those grades. They don't deserve them at all. They're actually pretty bad movies, unfortunately, and they were really disappointing. And Man of Steel, even though it was good, could have been so much better. The trailers for this movie looked really good. It actually looked like a movie that was standing apart from the rest of the universe and isn't obsessed with setting up a bunch of other movies and making connections to the rest of the universe. It actually looked like a movie that was separate from the rest of them, and it is that. But how's the story? How's the characters? How is everything in this movie balancing up to the other DC movies? Well, I gotta say, Wonder Woman is the best DC movie we've gotten so far. And I'm not Phantom Menacing when I say that. Phantom Menacing is a term where you're sort of in denial about how bad a movie is because you're so excited for it. I was very skeptical about this movie going in. I wasn't super excited like I was for Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman. This was a different experience for me because I had already seen the faults of the DC universe and I acknowledged the flaws in Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman. In this movie, most of those flaws have been taken away. This is a very great superhero movie, and I'm really happy to say that. Patty Jenkins has made one of the best DC movies I think I've ever seen. I mean, there obviously isn't that much competition because there's a lot of really bad DC movies, but still, I think this is probably one of the best DC movies that there has been in the entire span that DC movies have existed. Let's start with the characters first. Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman / Diana Prince is so much fun in this movie. In Batman v Superman, she was basically just shoved into the movie. She was shoehorned in there, and she was just like, oh hey, I'm gonna help you guys fight for no reason, yay! She was so shoehorned in the movie, you didn't even know who she was. If you knew nothing about DC, she would have just showed up and it would have just been like, what? Who the heck is this? Why is she in this movie? But in this movie, she actually has time to be a good character. But this movie actually fleshes out her character. She's curious. She doesn't know anything about the outside world. She really has hope in people. She wants to help humanity because she has a lot of hope in the human race. She's a very caring person. She has a really big heart, and that made her a really interesting character. Her motivation makes perfect sense. It isn't super confusing like Amanda Waller from Suicide Squad, but this movie actually gives you good characters that make good decisions and aren't complete idiots. Chris Pine in this movie was the other standout. This movie relied a lot more on Chris Pine than I thought it would. Chris Pine was actually really good in this movie, and in this movie I didn't see Chris Pine. Chris Pine's in a lot of stuff. He's in Star Trek, he's in Into the Woods. Chris Pine is in a lot of stuff, but in this movie, I didn't see Chris Pine. I saw a guy living in a very harsh time of war, wanting to do something about the troubles that are happening in the world, and this guy was such a funny, interesting character. One of the worst things about Man of Steel is that the romance between Clark Kent and Amy Adams was so boring. They had no chemistry. They didn't work off each other, so when they finally got together in the first Man of Steel, I didn't buy it at all. They had no chemistry at all. But in this movie, Diana Prince and Chris Pine actually do have chemistry. They really play off each other really well, and they tell a lot of jokes as well in this movie. This movie is very funny. It's colorful. It's fun. It embraces how ridiculous it is. It's not like Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, which are just boring and dry and stale. stale and just trying to be way too dark when the concept itself is so ridiculous. This movie knows that it's ridiculous. It knows that a goddess coming into World War I to fight a bunch of bad guys is a ridiculous concept, so they embrace that and have good humor, especially with Wonder Woman and Chris Pine's relationship in this movie. The romance in this movie was really good. Their chemistry worked so well, and they played off so well off each other. It's the heart and soul of this movie. Chris Pine and Wonder Woman so far are the two best characters in the DC Cinematic Universe, and that's kind of sad considering Ben Affleck is playing Batman. One of the things that is often said about Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad is that the action's really fun, the action's really good, but the story is kind of and I completely agree with that. Those movies have crap stories that don't make sense and are a complete mess. But this movie, it has really fun action that I really enjoyed and I'm going to remember. And it also has a story to balance that out that's really interesting. Like I said earlier, you understand the character's motivations. It's a story that's easy to follow. It's not like Batman v Superman where you're all over the place and you have no idea what's going on because of how messy it is. No, this movie actually has logic. It has character motivations, it has emotion for these characters, and it actually has some deep things, and it has a lot of things to say. I cannot believe that I'm saying this about a DCEU movie, but it's true. This movie has so many great things about it. You may be worried in the trailers with the action, where it showed that it was always slow-mo in the trailers. Well, in this movie, the slow-mo isn't too bad. I liked it for the most part. I actually thought it was really cool most of the time. They freezed it on good points, but there are a few points where it's like, yeah, that didn't need to be slow-mo. It's a little bit of an overuse of it, but that's a small nitpick because the action is mostly really good and it actually has stakes and you care about the characters and you understand where the story is going, so that makes the action all the better. Because in Batman v Superman, you're just like, when you're watching Batman and Superman fight, you could have just been like, you know, Superman could have just told Batman that Lex Luthor is forcing them to fight. He could have easily avoided getting out of this, but in this movie, there are actual stakes and the story makes sense. These are things we haven't seen in a DC movie in a long time. And like I said, this movie also has a lot of really thought-provoking themes in it. Thought-provoking themes that really went with the emotion, especially because the characters are so good, and the themes in this movie really went hand in hand with the emotion, and it made you feel emotional in this movie. There are literally some really unpredictable moments in this movie where I felt myself like with a little lump in my throat. Like, this isn't just a fun movie. This is actually a movie that has a lot of emotion and things to say about it. There are a few flaws I have with Wonder Woman, though. It's not a perfect movie, despite it being way better than I thought it would be, but there are a few problems with this movie. I felt like definitely with the first few minutes of this movie, the exposition is a little heavy. It is a little bit too heavy, and it's just like, okay, you could have explained this in a better way. And also, the villain characters, the execution of them could have been a lot better. That's all I'm gonna say because I don't want to spoil anything involving the villains because there's a lot of surprises that happen with them, but I felt like the execution regarding them could have been better. I felt like there are several villain characters in this movie, and I felt like the execution involving them could have been better because they had so much potential, but the potential just didn't really work because the execution just wasn't that good. But other than that, I had a huge blast with Wonder Woman. This is the best DCEU movie by far. The characters you can care about. The story you can actually follow. You can care about things that are happening in this movie. It makes sense. There are stakes. There are themes. There is fun action. It embraces how ridiculous it is. This is everything I wanted the other DC movies to be. It's almost as if Patty Jenkins saw Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad and Man of Steel and she was like, oh my gosh, these movies could be so much better. Let me fix that. And she made this movie. This movie almost had everything. Really, it really did. I'm gonna give Wonder Woman an A-. It is everything I wanted the other DCEU movies to be. Patty Jenkins has reinvigorated this universe, and I need Justice League to be like this. Please, I need Justice League to take notes from Wonder Woman and have a story that's actually followable and have good characters and have good motivations for said characters, and make it not a complete mess of stupidity. So guys, if you like my review of Wonder Woman, be sure to like this video, be sure to subscribe, be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I will be having a second upload today, and it is my short film. This short film is gonna happen tonight. It's gonna go up within a few hours after this video is uploaded, so look forward to that. I've been working really hard on that, and I can't wait to share it on my YouTube channel for you all to see. I can't wait to do it. Yay. Bye-bye now.